joins us now to react. Dana, do you call for the same thing? Is Senator Graham on to something?
Well, good morning, everyone. I think he is onto something. I think that all politicians should let Americans know where they stand on their right to self-defense. And I found retired Justice Stevens' op-ed incredibly interesting because in addition to calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment, he did so as a way to restrict speech because law-abiding Americans were just too good at speaking up in defense of their Second Amendment rights. So that struck me as incredibly odd from someone that, used to interpret and obviously write decisions on the Constitution. So it just is very odd for him to write that op-ed, and it seemed to really kind of undermine any defense that he would ever have in standing up for free speech. Well, but I think that everybody, yes, Graham's right. Get on record. Where do you stand?
Dana, is this revealing of where the left truly stands? We hear all the time about reasonable and responsible gun legislation, yet when you ask protesters, as we did many, and you hear this op-ed, there's a lot of them that want to get to the heart of the very right itself, the Second Amendment.
Yeah, no, Pete, you're completely right on that. And I think for the first time that we're finally starting to see anti-gun advocates be honest about where they are on this issue. Whenever they sit here and they talk about the AR-15, we know that that's a stand-in for all semi-automatic firearms. I know that Chris Murphy's one of the things that he introduced in the House, and he's specifically looking at semi-automatic firearms. We saw all the repeal the Second Amendment signs. We see this over and over, and we're always told, well, we don't want to take your guns, but yet that's what you're writing. You're writing actual editorials and nationally distributed publications where you're talking about repealing the Second Amendment. You had one of the former heads of Everytown who went on another Fox program and was talking about mandatory buyback, which is just a word salad for confiscation. So that's exactly what they want. They just stop short of actually articulating it because they know it doesn't poll well.
A word salad. I like that. Do you think this just helps conservatives and helps the president's agenda?
I think ultimately it does. I mean, that's one of the reasons, Ainsley, why former President Obama was the best seller of firearms than I think anybody before him or after him. Whenever you start talking about restricting people's rights, it makes people a little nervous. They want to be able to protect themselves and their families, right?
Dana, the other big question is, what do you take from last Saturday's 200,000 plus that showed up and all those other city demonstrations? What do you think comes of this?
Well, I love free speech. I'm a free speech purist. It's why I always believe in more, not fewer voices. It's why I'm not like the anti-gun advocates who are trying to get all pro-gun advocates kicked off television and radio and going after their advertisers if they're radio hosts. It's why I don't believe in anything like that. So I'm fine. I just think that all of the money that was spent on concerts and porta potties, and because they had armed security there as well, a lot of that could have been spent on school security measures. All of those individuals could have actually been meeting with elected officials. I see Andrew Pollack and I see Ryan Petty and I see Kyle Kushov out there meeting with elected officials and doing everything that they can to implement change. And they're having, I mean, they have a lot of measurable success. That's what really it takes. I mean, you can march all day long. Heaven knows I've protested before, but ultimately you got to follow it up with action.
Dana, I mean, during this debate, you've had some of the nastiest things pointed at you personally, as far as your motives. How do we get to the point where an actual discussion is had as opposed to impugning the motives of every opponent?
Pete, that's the million-dollar question. It really is, and it hasn't been just me either. It's been, anybody who supported the Second Amendment and their right of self-defense. We're not terrorists. I'm a mother. I have one of my oldest children is just a year or so younger than some of these teenagers that are on television and in the school.
What kinds of things have happened? Sorry to interrupt you, but I am curious.
Yeah, no, you hear all kinds of nasty stuff. Obviously, my kids don't agree and their friends don't really agree with what they've seen. And I hear it over and over again. And actually, my son had said this to me. He said, why is it that the media always goes to only one type of young person? Why is it the media ignores all of the other young people who bring really good ideas to the table and maybe don't agree with what the anchors and the reporters say? Maybe they really believe in their rights. Why don't you hear more from those individuals? Right. He said, we never see those people on television. I mean, yes. I mean, kids notice this stuff. They're seeing that there's bias and they see that there's only one side ever presented. That's not a debate. You're just being lectured to.
Yeah, so true. And you don't get the kids see it, we see it, everyone sees it, and yet we're getting policy advice from young people who have the right to speak out as much as they want, but it doesn't make you a gun expert out the gate. Someone like you have spent your lifetime committed to what the Second Amendment truly means. So you want those voices, but they don't need to be automatic authorities out the gate, I would think.
Well, no, I completely agree with that. And I've said before, I think if you are not mature enough to carry a firearm, I think that we need to hesitate to take firearm policy lectures from those individuals. But, it's all about wanting to, families, other families like mine, we have different ideas about how we want to keep our kids safe. We think that our kids deserve just as much security as, red carpet celebrities. And I really wish that the other side of the debate would stop projecting, their worst, just some bigoted notions on Second Amendment advocates. I wish that they would stop projecting the worst ideas onto us and stop and listen and maybe not assume the worst. Maybe give your fellow Americans a little bit of credit and ask them and have real conversations. Why do you feel that this is the best way? Instead of saying you have blood on your hands or you like your guns more than your children.
All right, Dana Loesch, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dana.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, coming up straight ahead, David Shulkin is out as VN Secretary. Reaction from the White House next.
Plus, should snow days be made up on Memorial Day?